I had always considered myself a level-headed individual, navigating life's ups and downs with a sense of resilience and patience. However, the last few months had been a relentless test of my resolve. My marriage to Pam had begun to unravel, each day presenting a new challenge that chipped away at the foundation we had built over the years. Despite my best efforts to keep our relationship afloat, it seemed as though we were drifting further apart with each passing day. Pam's behavior had become increasingly erratic, and our once harmonious household was now a battlefield of constant arguments and bitter silence. The woman I had fallen in love with seemed to have vanished, replaced by someone who barely resembled her former self. It was as if we were strangers living under the same roof, bound together by memories that now felt distant and irrelevant. As the tension escalated, I realized that something had to give, and I could no longer ignore the reality that our marriage was in serious trouble. A deep, audible groan slipped from my lips as I struggled to turn over. I had just regained consciousness and instinctively knew I needed to rise swiftly. Sadly, my body didn't heed the urgent signals from my hazy mind. Initially, I was bewildered by the intense pain engulfing me. Why was I sprawled face down in the dirt, producing small dust clouds with each breath I attempted to draw? My back throbbed, my head pounded, my arms felt immobile, and my fingers were crushed. Even my legs ached as much as my torso and stomach. Contrary to what I had once read, that the human body couldn't feel pain from multiple regions simultaneously, I was now convinced the author of that piece was sorely mistaken. A voice came from the darkness, groaning, "Hey, stupid, are you awake and ready for round 2? Then came a mocking laugh. I lay still, gathering my thoughts. My name is Charlie Wilson. I'm 33, an accountant, 6 feet tall, and weigh about 200 pounds. I work out 3 times a week, run 5Ks twice a week, and sometimes mountain bike. I'm married to Pam Wilson, who's 30. We've been married for 5 years and have no kids, because Pam wants more time to enjoy life. Now I remember why I'm lying here in the dirt. Our home life had fallen apart over the past 6 to 8 weeks. It wasn't just a lack of sex, it was everything. Pam's sarcastic comments, angry outbursts, belittling my manhood, my appearance, and my family. She stopped cleaning and cooking, things we used to share. I even recall how we met and started dating, but those memories aren't helpful now. Tired of the abuse, I took a day off to follow Pam. She went to her job at the supermarket, but after her shift, things got interesting. It was a warm September evening. Pam left work and drove to a convenience store, pulling an overnight case from the trunk. By the way, she was driving a nice car I paid for since her wages barely covered her clothes and makeup. I didn't mind paying the bills because I loved her and wanted the best for my wife. When she exited the convenience store, Pam was wearing the shortest microskirt I'd ever seen. Her sheer blouse revealed she wasn't wearing a bra. She shook her hips as she walked back to her car, heading toward the sleazy bars on the outskirts of town. I followed her to a biker hangout, the sleaziest of the bunch. As she parked and got out, making sure her lap was visible, a couple of bikers by the door smiled and nodded, clearly familiar with her. I parked my old Dodge Power Wagon a little way from the bar. I could afford a new vehicle, but this truck was my dad's from the 80s. He kept it in perfect condition, and I've maintained it with a lift kit and new tires. The bikers glanced at my truck and then went back to their conversation. I smelled weed as I walked closer. Wearing jeans and an old t-shirt, I fit in better than if I'd worn my usual suit. Following my wife wasn't something you did in business attire. I entered the bar, which had no cover charge. I headed to the bar and ordered a beer, choosing whatever was on tap. As I sipped, I used the mirror behind the bar to scan the room. Pam was easy to spot. She was much prettier than the few other women there. She was sitting on the lap of a massive guy, easily over 6 feet tall and 250 pounds, clearly a regular at the gym. I decided to finish my beer and leave when Pam stopped kissing the guy and looked around the room, making sure everyone saw her with the alpha male. Then she saw me. Crap, she recognized me. I quickly got up, but Pam pointed me out and yelled, "That's my husband, Charlie. Stop him, someone. He's going to ruin this for us all." A guy grabbed my arm and I shoved him into the wall hard enough to break free. As I headed for the door, another guy swung at my head. I ducked and his fist barely grazed me. I punched him in the gut, causing him to double over. I didn't wait to see if he went down. I reached the door just as another big guy was entering. The behemoth was shouting, "Get him now!" The new guy blocked my way for a moment. Remembering my football coach's advice to block through opponents, I aimed for the open air outside, lowered my shoulder, and drove him back. He wrapped his arms around me, and as we cleared the door, he tripped me, throwing me over his shoulder. I rolled down the steps into the dirt and quickly got up, but the behemoth joined the fight. This guy was massive and strong. He smashed through my defenses and I could barely land a blow. Every punch and kick from him brought intense pain. Once I was on the ground, he kept hitting me without breaking a sweat, taunting me the whole time. "Take this, loser. I'll screw her 3 times tonight to show you who's boss. She comes here, and you get my leftovers." I was barely conscious, and Pam's laughter echoed in my ears. The behemoth told the others to watch me and call him if I got up, saying, "I want another piece of him before the night's over." Now that I was conscious again, I needed a plan to get out without taking another beating. One eye wouldn't open, likely due to dried blood. I worked my trapped right hand until I could wipe the blood away and open my eyelids slightly. My left eye seemed fine. Unsure where the watchers were, I hoped I was in a shadow and began to inch toward my truck, moving quietly and stopping often. Once in the shadow of the bikes near Pam's car, I got up on my knees, biting my cheek to keep from crying out in pain. My breathing was ragged, indicating possible broken ribs. It hurt to take even shallow breaths, so I moved very slowly. I noticed the watchers were distracted by dope and booze, not paying attention. No one was near my truck. Hunched over, I slowly made my way to it. I unlocked and opened the door. The dome light came on, a beacon in the dark lot. I regretted the high lift of the truck as I climbed up, but fear pushed me. Settling into the seat, I put the key in the ignition. With the door shut, the dome light turned off. I took a few calming breaths, trying to figure out my next move. Once I started the truck, the noise would alert my attackers. How to get away? I saw Pam's car and the neatly lined up bikes about 30 yards ahead. I couldn't engage the hubs for 4-wheel drive, so I'd have to do this in 2-wheel drive. It was time. I started the engine, which caught on the first try. Dropping the transmission into low gear, I floored it. The watchers by the door looked up bleary-eyed as my truck launched toward Pam's car and the bikes. The timber bumper smashed into the left side of Pam's car, lifting it and slamming it into the bikes. The noise brought the watchers fully alert and screaming. I kept going until I couldn't move forward anymore, then backed up without getting stuck. Twisting the wheel, I hit second gear, clearing the wreckage before crashing into the rest of the bikes, pushing them against the bar door and blocking it. Unfortunately, I couldn't hit the building itself, but I would have loved to drop it on Pam and her lover. I backed up, spun my wheels, and kicked up a cloud of dust as I exited the parking lot and headed out of town. I was in pain, and steering and shifting hadn't helped my breathing. I needed a hospital, but wasn't going to the local one. I aimed for a trauma center 50 miles west. For a few miles, no one followed me, but soon I saw headlights approaching fast. They weren't police lights, just motorcycles catching up. I hadn't gotten them all. A couple of bikes came alongside, and chains bounced off the truck. They couldn't hurt the truck much, but they might scratch the paint. I knew I couldn't outrun them, so I swerved across the center line, forcing the bikes off the road into ditches, where they wrecked. I did the same to the ones on the right, watching one biker cartwheel off his bike. More were still behind me, dangerously close. I hoped they wouldn't try jumping into the truck bed. Suddenly, I slammed on the brakes and felt a small thump. When I hit the gas again, there were no more headlights behind me. In movies, bikers always win against cars, but apparently it's easier to shake them off in real life. As I neared Centerville and the trauma center, I began to worry about Pam finding me. She and Behemoth would likely check home or the nearest hospital first. If I was admitted to the trauma center, they might look there eventually. I needed a plan to stay hidden. I remembered an acquaintance with land near Centerville. He rarely visited his pasture, which might work for me. I found his small ranch, abandoned for years, but still with an old farmhouse and barn. I parked behind the barn, leaving my wallet and ID in the truck and hiding the keys on the rear wheel. Walking was painful, but I had to distance myself before calling emergency. After about a mile, the pain and shortness of breath became unbearable. I sat on the edge of the gravel road and dialed emergency, whispering, "Help me. I was abducted and humbled and woke on the side of the road. I don't know where I am. Please send help." I wasn't lying about my situation, just my knowledge of the location. The operator asked for landmarks, but I let the phone drop to my side, knowing they could use GPS to find me. I mentioned the gravel road, but didn't provide any other details. Then I lay down to rest. I must have fallen asleep or passed out because the next thing I knew, someone was bending over me. At first, I couldn't tell who it was. Was it Behemoth or one of his cronies? It was definitely a man, so not Pam. Plus, I had trashed her car. It was getting light, so daybreak was near. But what day was it? Had I been on this country road for more than a day? The voice kept asking questions. I finally made up a name for him. My voice was still a whisper, worsened by the striking and lack of fluids. My name is Sam Adams. I live in Wilsonville. I'm 40 years old and I'm allergic to penicillin. All lies, but the man didn't know that. Without ID, no one could refute my story. I told him I had been mugged, humbled, and dumped here. I asked what day it was and felt relieved when I realized I hadn't been unconscious for over a day. Soon, an ambulance arrived and I was off to the trauma center. The paramedic started an IV, gave me something for nausea and pain. I went with the flow and didn't complain except for the biggest bumps. We reached the trauma center in minutes. A kind nurse carefully washed the dried blood off my face while the doctor examined my injuries. I stuck to the story that I had been abducted, humbled, and dumped in a rural area. I claimed my wallet was missing and gave them a fake birthday, a mix of my mom's birth date and my brother's birth year, making me 36 instead of 40. I figured they wouldn't mind since I had been unconscious multiple times. A police officer came in to question me. I gave a location in a different town for the abduction and made up another lie for my home address. I also said I was divorced and had no family, which was easier to remember. The cop asked, "Do you ride a motorcycle?" I answered truthfully, "I used to, but I haven't owned one in years." "Why do you ask?" "We're investigating a series of accidents about 20 miles from town. 2 bikers were eliminated and 6 others were injured. None of them could tell us what happened. We suspect a rival bike gang might have caused the crashes." I shook my head. "I don't know anyone in a bike club. No one I work with even owns a bike." "Any idea who might have wanted to hurt you?" "Nope. I'm divorced and live alone. I work on a non-union construction site, and we haven't had any trouble with union guys for a long time. I drink a single beer about once a week because I have a drinking problem and can't afford to get too drunk. The last time I did, it took weeks to sober up, and it was hell getting my reputation back. My ex-wife remarried and is doing well. She left me because of my drinking, and I doubt her husband is jealous since she probably told him about all the crappy things I used to do." The officer finally left, and the nurse returned. "The doctor wants you to stay overnight. He's concerned about your kidney function because there was some blood in your urine. You also have broken ribs that need to heal. We'll give you pain medicine so you can breathe adequately." I nodded and let them proceed. When alone again, I called my brother Dave. "I need some help." Dave, always cool, took it in stride. I told him what happened and where I was, also giving him my fake name for any visits. "What do you need right now?" he asked. He had always liked Pam but didn't question me. "I need my stuff from the house. Can you arrange for a mover who won't ask questions and won't let Pam interfere and put my things in storage?" He agreed easily, knowing some guys who could handle quick, discreet moves. I texted him a list of what I wanted from the house and didn't care if they had to force the door. My next call was to a realtor, an old friend from the neighborhood. "Mike, I need a quick favor." "No problem, Charlie. What's up?" "Pam is cheating on me with a biker. I don't know his name, but he hangs out at Mario's on the edge of town. I need to list my house and sell it fast so she can't move him in. The house is in my name since her credit was bad when we bought it. I had planned to add her to the title but never did. We haven't gone to court yet, so I want to complicate things for her." "Okay, Charlie, I understand. But what if Pam is at the house when I come by for the market assessment and to put up the sign?" "Right now, she's just a tenant and can't say anything about ownership. Tell her I've moved and the house has to go." I thought for a moment. "Why don't you act as my rental manager and bring a month-to-month lease agreement? Include terms requiring her to keep the house in good condition and ready to show. Tell her she has to sign it or be evicted. I don't think she's smart enough to fight it until she gets a lawyer, and I doubt she'll do that until she's served." I also mentioned the movers coming soon. He chuckled and promised to bring a new lock for whichever door would be breached. I was moved to a room, given breakfast, and got some sleep. I didn't plan to call a lawyer yet. I wanted Pam to stew for a couple of days. Dave called back in the afternoon. "Charlie, all done. The guys got your recliner, microwave, washer and dryer, guest bedroom set, weapons and weapon safe, and all your tools. They even took the dishes, pans, and utensils to inconvenience Pam. Oh, and bleach accidentally got poured on the master bed. The fabric probably won't hold up, and the room might need airing out for a few days." I chuckled, despite the pain. "Was she there?" "They didn't see her at all. I think they were disappointed. You know the guys. They don't like witches." I agreed. He promised to pick me up when I was released. "You might be wondering about my finances. Did Pam raid the coffers? Remember, I'm an accountant, a good one. Some of my clients from the old neighborhood have shady income, and I make it look clean for the IRS. Pam only had access to her money and a joint account I regularly funded. She couldn't touch the savings or investment accounts. Sure, I'll have to share eventually, but not until a judge orders it. Right now, she only has her cashier's wages, unless Behemoth is supporting her. She withdrew all the cash from the joint account, but no problem. I still had my own separate account for my pay, in a different bank. Around 6 in the evening, Mike called me back. I didn't know he disliked Pam until he said, "Charlie, your wife is pretty upset. She was there when I came by this afternoon. The front door was wide open when she returned, and she noticed stuff was missing. She was pleasant until I replaced the lock and put the key in a box on the door. She got angry when I did that. By the way, you need a new front door. It's damaged and will hurt the sale." I chuckled, the pain medicine helping. "Did she have any problem with being told she's now a tenant and needs to pay rent?" He chuckled. "Oh yeah, she didn't take it well when I told her the house was for sale. She nearly popped a blood vessel and screamed at me to get off the property. I told her I was the new rental manager and only the owner could make me leave. I handed her the lease to sign, but she refused and wanted to know where you were. She said you hadn't been answering her calls. Have you blocked her number? I didn't tell her your location because I don't know it." "Darn it," I said sarcastically. "Did you tell her she'd be evicted if she didn't sign the lease?" "Yeah, but she thinks she knows better. I gave her 24 hours to sign or I'd serve the eviction notice. I hope she doesn't sign. She'll be out within 30 days if she doesn't. I know a couple of sheriff's deputies who would gladly help move her stuff to the curb." After he hung up, I checked my phone. Somehow, while I was out of it, I had blocked her number. She had tried calling and texting multiple times since midnight. Instead of deleting them, I decided to keep the messages for my future divorce attorney. I slept well that night, possibly due to the pain medication, but I like to think it was because making Pam upset was a great sleep aid. The next morning, the doctor finally came around. He told me I was being released. My kidney function had improved and my breathing was okay, but I wouldn't be running for a while. The doctor made me promise to take care of myself and avoid getting abducted again. When Dave arrived at the hospital, I had corrected my name for admissions and had my office provide the insurance information since I still didn't have my wallet. Dave drove me to my truck, and we headed back to our hometown. I was now homeless, so I checked in at work. My boss was livid that I had disappeared for days but calmed down when I explained I'd been abducted, humbled, and left for dead. He asked who might want to hurt me and mentioned Pam was looking for me. I chuckled wryly and said she could go to hell, suspecting he had a thing for her. I arranged to take a couple more days off to find a place to live. It was a slow time at work since quarterly reports were done and tax season was still far off. I quickly found an apartment near work. The local economy was poor, so housing was easy to find. I signed a year lease, paid deposits for utilities, and called the cell phone company to make my plan month to month, arranging to cut off Pam's service in a few days. This would give me time to inform her she was on her own. After that, I went to a furniture rental company and picked out a couch and bedroom set, then bought pots, pans, dishes, and utensils. I knew Dave's friends had taken all of that from the house, but I planned to return them to Pam if she asked. I called Dave to arrange a time for his friends to bring my stuff over. Then, I sat in my new place and called my soon-to-be ex-wife. "Hello? Is that you, Charlie?" she asked. "Unless someone stole my phone, of course it is," I replied. "Why do you have to be insulting? Where are you, and why haven't you been home?" she demanded. "Are you stupid or what? I stopped at a bar for a beer and saw you with your new lover. I didn't confront you because it was clear from the way you've treated me lately that you found someone new and used me as a bill payer. I tried to leave, but your boyfriend punched me up while you left. I ended up in the hospital for days, worried about my ribs and kidneys. And you ask why I haven't been back? Are you seriously deranged? Why would I go near you again so your new man can punch me? Do you want me dead?" I said, frustration rising. She started to blubber some nonsense, but I continued, hoping she was recording this. "That's it, isn't it? You get me eliminated, say I was jealous of your innocent relationship with that guy, and then you get everything. The house, my money, my pension, and my life insurance. Too bad I thwarted your plan." She began to cry. "I need you to come home. Everything's gone wrong. The house is up for sale and things are missing. I think someone broke in before I got home." "And stole things?" I asked disbelievingly. "Yeah, someone I know took my things to help me set up my new place. I'll be fully set up tomorrow. It sucks for you, but I bet your new man will be supportive and help out," I said, sarcasm heavy in my voice. "How can you be so cruel? That realtor said I have to start paying rent? Why do I have to pay rent on our home? This is so wrong. What happened to us? She sobbed. I snorted. What happened to us? Are you really that clueless? Or do you think I am? Look in the mirror for your answer. You treated me like crap. Started a new relationship before leaving me. Spent my money on skimpy clothes and bar hopping. That night wasn't the first time you were with him. Everyone there knew you. Then you stood and laughed as he punched me. If I'd made any noise, he would have finished the job. So, kiss my bum. You are now a renter and Mike is the landlord. Don't talk to me about the rent, just pay it or get out. But I need some money. There's nothing left in the checking account, she pleaded. There won't be. I'll keep paying the utilities until the house sells. You pay the rent with your paycheck. Quit buying makeup and clothes for a while. You have enough to get by. Or better yet, get drunk to pay your way, I retorted. But you're my husband. You were supposed to take care of me, she argued. And as my wife, you cheered while your lover and his gang punched me up. Guess we both lose, huh? I countered. What do I do for a car? Mine was totaled, and I need a way to get to work, she asked, desperation in her voice. Call your boyfriend. You can ride on the back of his bike. You're already used to straddling something he owns, I said coldly. He's in the hospital with a head injury and multiple broken bones. He crashed chasing you when you hit the brakes. He flew a few meters and landed on his head, she explained. Karma, I guess. Too bad he didn't die. Tell him I'll be watching for him. If I see him first, I'll avoid him. Otherwise, I'll be carrying my weapon and will shoot instead of talking, I warned. The insults kept coming, so I told her to eat crap and die, then hung up. Her number was still blocked, so I didn't have to turn off my phone. I tried to sleep, but without a bed, it was too painful to lie on the floor. I finally went to a decent motel and checked in for the night to sleep in a real bed. In the morning, it took all my strength to get up. I hoped I would heal quickly. I wondered if prize fighters felt this bad after 10 rounds with a tough opponent. After a quick breakfast, I returned to the apartment. Soon, Dave's guys unloaded and set up my stuff. I gave each of them an extra $100 for their trouble. Then, the rental place delivered the couch and other furniture, and I tipped them too. I realized I needed to hit the bank for more cash. I like to keep a couple thousand in easy-to-access cash. After all, I'm not entirely clean. My accounting practices for certain clients might be slightly illegal. So I have a go bag ready, and no, it's not at my former house. I sat in my recliner thinking about my next steps. Should I disappear for a while or stay and act like everything's normal? When should I divorce my cheating wife? Should I make her wait? Pretending to reconcile and then dumping her was pointless. She'd just continue with Behemoth or find someone else. Maybe I should wait until she gets a lawyer. In our state, divorce outcomes aren't based on why it's filed unless she goes to jail for my striking. The judge wouldn't care about the reasons, just who pays what. She'd get at least 50% of everything publicly known, and I'd keep the rest. How can I make her life harder? I need some retribution. The gravy train has stopped, and she'll have to fend for herself now. I hope the house sells quickly. I priced it to move fast. Her boyfriend is in the hospital, and I hope he suffers long term. That goes for his friends who were there when he punched me too. Do I expect visits from his friends? Yes, they'll want revenge eventually. I went to my weapons safe and got out my judge. It holds 5 rounds and can shoot either .45 long Colt or .410 shot shells. I loaded it with .410 slugs that can blast through a concrete wall. I vowed to carry it everywhere, along with extra .45 and .410 rounds in a leg bag. I pondered for a bit, believing the best defense was a solid offense. So who should pay next for my wife's infidelity? I decided to wait and see what happened. The next few days were uneventful. I went back to work, keeping the judge in my waistband just in case. Pam started calling me from a new number, thinking we'd had a minor spat and I was overreacting. When I asked how Behemoth was, she pretended not to know who I meant. I didn't know my attacker's real name, and she didn't recognize Behemoth. Finally, I asked about her biker buddy, and she said, Steve is doing better, but he might never walk or ride again. I almost lost it. Steve wasn't a name that inspired fear. She agreed, saying his biker name was Grizzly. Now that was a name I could respect. Sorry to all the Steves, but you have to agree. She still wanted to know when I was coming home. I said never. She also wanted to ask about the rent. I ended the call and blocked the new number. A few days later, a motorcycle tried to follow me home from work. He stood out with his leathers, beard, and long hair in a traditional business area. I made sure to drive in the opposite direction, losing him in heavy traffic. I cut across 3 lanes, leaving him in the stack-up lane, and then returned to my apartment. I ensured the judge was ready to act if anyone successfully followed me to my new place. The next day, another biker, dressed just as conspicuously, tried to follow me. I decided to lead him to Pam's house. Not knowing if she was home since her car was in the junkyard, I parked in her driveway, waited until the biker passed by, and then drove off in the opposite direction. No one bothered me that night, and I slept a bit better. The bruises were nasty, but healing. The following morning, 2 cops came to my work and asked about my whereabouts the previous night. I had no alibi, having eaten and slept alone at my apartment. When I asked why, they told me my estranged wife, Pam Wilson, reported vandalism at her house while she was visiting a friend in the hospital, suggesting it was me due to a misunderstanding. I pointed out the for sale sign in the yard and asked why I would damage a property I was selling. He had no answer, so I explained. My wife is having an affair with the guy in the hospital who gave me these bruises. He put me in the hospital for 2 days after striking me. My wife encouraged him and laughed at my attempt to defend myself. His friends blame me for an accident they had. If I were investigating, I'd talk to Steve, her boyfriend. The cops said neighbors reported loud motorcycles in my driveway that night. I suggested they might have assumed I still lived there after I picked up some belongings. After they left, I called Mike. Pam's house was vandalized last night. I still have homeowner's insurance, so I need damage estimates. Let Pam know she needs renter's insurance. He laughed. Couldn't happen to a nicer person. She's still balking about the lease. I'll drop by with law enforcement to remind her it's her responsibility to keep the house livable after repairs. I take it you're not involved. No, but Behemoth's friends have been following me. I led one by Pam's house, likely causing the mistaken identity. The police are questioning her boyfriend Steve, I explained. Later, Pam called. What do you want? She asked. Why did you try to sick the cops on me? I demanded. Why would I damage a property I'm selling? Are you taking stupid pills? She shot back. She was taken aback, gulped, and then spoke more calmly. Charlie, I'm sorry. Since you're mad at me, I thought you might have done the damage. After the cops left, I called Steve. He admitted some of his friends might have been seeking revenge. You hurt a lot of the guys and damaged many motorcycles. I hurt someone? Who and how? I was the one lying face down after your boyfriend punched me unconscious. Sure, I stopped them from chasing me, but how can you say I hurt anyone? I ended up in the hospital, I retorted. Steve and the others know you ran them off the road. They were just trying to stop you from going to the cops. You didn't have to liquidate and maim anyone, she argued. Jesus, listen to yourself. I was the one punched unconscious, and your boyfriend had people watching me to finish the job. You stood there cheering. Now his friends trashed your house, and you blame me. Keep taking those stupid pills. You'll be turning tricks to support Behemoth soon, I responded sharply. She tried to blame me, but I cut her off. Mike will come by today to assess the damage and report it for insurance. After the claim, I will only insure the dwelling as a rental. You need renter's insurance, I stated. But this is our home, not a rental. Why are you doing this? She pleaded. I took a deep breath. What part of your cheating and throwing away our marriage don't you understand? This is all on you. I was happy to support you, but you cheated, started a relationship with another man, and cheered when he punched me. You egged him and his friends on. You wanted me hurt. This is all on you. I finished. I ended the call and tried to move on with my day. My ribs hurt from deep breaths and my face ached from healing abrasions. I was furious. Later, as I left work, another biker was waiting. He followed me, staying a couple of cars behind. I drove toward Centerville at a calm speed. As I reached the city edge, I took a side street and made quick turns. He had to close the gap to keep up. I then slammed on the brakes and turned the truck sideways. It was a narrow street, leaving him little room. I jumped out and pulled the judge from my holster. His face turned sick as I held the pistol up, not aimed at his chest, but enough to show I meant business. He tried to bluff. Hey, mister, I don't know what your problem is. I just want to get home down the street. Why the sudden stop and weapon? He stammered. Buddy, I don't buy that. You followed me from work. We're 40 miles from wherever you think is home. There are no warnings for you and your friends. I'm done being nice. You watched Grizzly punch me down, and some of your friends paid the price for trying to run me down. Last night, you vandalized Grizzly's girlfriend's house thinking you had me. Now you're sitting there without backup, begging me to drop you. One shot from this weapon and you'll lie in the street with a huge hole in your chest, knowing you're dying and there's nothing you can do. He started to bluster, but stopped when I cocked the judge. I told you, no more warnings. If you survive, tell your buddies how serious I am. I'll tell the DA and cops I felt threatened. I have an order of protection against you and your friends. I actually didn't, but he didn't know that. I'll plead self-defense. I doubt many will care if I put a couple of you down. Maybe I'll get a humanitarian award for removing you from the gene pool. I stepped forward. Look around. Do you see anyone paying attention? The good people here probably heard your bike and don't want to get involved. Do you hear sirens? The cops either don't know or don't care enough to intervene. He looked around. There was no one on the street, even though it was early evening and the weather was mild. I casually clicked the cylinder 2 stops. His face got even more ghastly. I was only 5 or 6 feet away when I raised the judge and shot out his headlight with a .410 shell loaded with birdshot. There was no penetration through the headlight assembly, and I was too close for the pattern to spread and punch him. I think he crapped his pants. Now I needed to get this piece of trash turned around and headed home. Darkness is coming, and you have no headlight. I might be following you, and I don't think you'd fare well in a collision in the dark. He nodded and made the multiple turns needed to get his ride pointed the other way, then took off like a scalded dog. I waited until he turned the corner before heading back to my truck and driving toward downtown for a bit before heading home. I kept a close eye on traffic in case he had called his buddies to find me. I got back to my apartment and parked the truck behind the building as usual before carefully making my way in. I had replaced the empty cartridge with another .410 shell, but this one had slugs. No more Mr. Nice Guy. The rest of my evening and night were uneventful. I wish I could say it stayed that way and common sense prevailed in the bike world, but the truce only lasted a month until Stevie Boy got out of the hospital. That fateful night started with me checking my mirror often as I drove a meandering way to my apartment. I didn't see anyone following me, so I relaxed a little and headed home. I parked behind the building as usual and was soon eating my previously frozen meal while watching some evening football. It was late in the season, so there wouldn't be many night games during the week. The game was just ending, and I was contemplating bed when there was a sudden banging on my apartment door. The accompanying tirade, slightly muffled, let me know Steve now knew where I lived. I turned on the video recorder on my phone and called emergency. Isn't it grand how new phones multitask? I asked for law enforcement, saying I was afraid for my life. The dispatcher could hear the yelling through the phone and assured me help was on the way. I contemplated opening the door to let Behemoth in, but decided that might look like entrapment. I decided to wait for him to break the flimsy door down. I was standing with the judge ready when the door finally popped open, pulling one hinge from the frame. Steve, a.k.a. Grizzly, rushed in with a grin. Well, craphead, it's time for you to pay for your screw-up. His hands were raised to rain down destruction. He didn't even look at the weapon in my hand. I fired 2 shots into his chest. His hands dropped to his chest, and he got a strange, wondering look on his face. His momentum kept him coming, so I sidestepped. A couple of his biker friends were coming in, likely to help liquidate me. I didn't give them the chance. Each received a single shot to the center mass. They went down. Those slugs have good stopping power. I wished it was like the movies where their bodies would slam against the doorway, but they just dropped, groaning and begging for help. I went back to my phone and told the dispatcher to send 2 or 3 ambulances as I had just shot multiple attackers. While talking, I reloaded the judge. The job might not be done. I started to relax as I heard sirens and then motorcycles roaring out of the parking lot. Steve's friends didn't want to be interviewed about why they were outside my apartment. Neither of the 2 extra bikers looked good, but they were breathing and crying in pain. I likely hit them in the abdomen. Steve was gasping for air, bloody bubbles appearing in his chest wounds. He wasn't defeated, though. He gasped out invectives in a hoarse whisper. I brought the phone close to record some of it. You idiot! Why didn't you just roll over and die when I kicked your bum? She belongs to me now. He managed to blurt that out. I looked him straight in the eyes. I told her to tell you that if I saw you first, I'd avoid you. But if you came for me, I'd put you down like a rabid dog. Apparently, stupid people don't learn lessons. I hope your other friends learn before I bring mine. You think you're bad? I shut off the recorder before speaking again, so the rest of our conversation wouldn't be admissible. I leaned close to his ear. Well, I have friends who won't make a public statement about the lack of worth your badass friends have. They will just disappear. Their bikes will be chopped up and sold. Their families will have many questions, but no answers. Just the mental image of a dark hole where no one will ever find them. His 2 companions wouldn't be able to testify about what I said. Right then, Steve took his last breath. I can't say if he understood what I told him, but I was ready to repeat the lesson if needed. The cops arrived, and I made sure they saw I posed no threat by kneeling on the floor with the judge open and the shells on the floor in front of me. I had my hands behind my head, but I kept an eye on the two lying on the floor in case they got brave. The first cop held his weapon on us all while I was handcuffed. Then the other two were cuffed, even though they posed no threat. I guess everyone is a suspect until it's sorted out. A quick search by one of the cops revealed knives and pistols on both bikers. Even Behemoth was armed with a pistol and brass knuckles. The ambulance crews arrived quickly and took the two bikers out as they were starting to look gray. The two next arriving cops rode with them to Centerville's trauma center. I'd been responsible for a lot of business there these past few months. The cops interviewed me on the scene. After reading my Miranda rights, I had them call an attorney I knew and then gave my statement. I held nothing back this time. They took my phone and radioed the dispatcher to timestamp the emergency call recording for evidence. My phone also had selfies of my injuries from Behemoth's striking, along with messages and calls from my estranged wife. I figured the DA would have a field day with them. They took me to the station and booked me on manslaughter, use of a firearm within city limits, and aggravated assault. The detective who re-interviewed me said more charges might come. Then my attorney arrived, and the questions stopped for a while. The next morning I was released on my own recognizance. The papers and news teams had gotten the story, painting me as a man persecuted by bad actors who finally defended himself. The DA got calls demanding my release and agreed. I was told charges were still pending and that all my weapons were taken as evidence until it was settled. I wasn't worried. I had friends who could rearm me. The DA mentioned Pam was telling a different story. According to her, Steve wanted me to become his accountant and to let bygones be bygones. I had to laugh. The recordings told a different story, and the DA hoped the violence would die down. I just nodded as I left the police station. Pam met me at the door. "You butcher! How dare you liquidate my man? He was just coming to bury the hatchet, not to threaten you, and you shot him in cold blood." She tried to slap me, but two cops arriving at the door soon had her in cuffs. My attorney told them to press charges for domestic assault, and they hustled her inside. I think she's still taking those stupid pills. Hopefully the DA will play the break-in recording to her, and maybe she'll shut up. But I doubted it. I couldn't go back to my apartment since it was still a crime scene, so Dave took me to his house. It was time to end this farce. First, my new attorney gathered the information needed to file for divorce from Pam. Then he left, and Dave and I had a council of war. Steve's friends needed to see the error of their ways, and my old friends would deliver the message. First order of business, the owner of Mario's, the bar where this all started, suddenly sold out to a consortium of investors. The place was to be shuttered and remodeled as a venue for kids' birthday parties. The bikers would have to find another meeting spot. Before Mario's closed, a couple of hard men, who didn't hide their big and nasty weapons, came into the bar and sat at the table used by the bike club. Later, I heard that everyone at the table understood that any further retribution against me would be viewed unfavorably by my friends. A couple of names were dropped, old friends and business associates with bad reputations. I believe the message was received loud and clear. It took a few weeks, but the charges were dropped. Pam tried to cause trouble, but the DA warned her that lying to the police was a felony. She finally admitted that Stevie Boy wasn't looking to hire me, but was intent on making me pay for hurting his friends. She remained unrepentant. I guess she really believed she loved him, and he loved her. It cost me half of my known assets to get her out of my life, but it was worth it. But let me emphasize, only my known assets. A little birdie told me a very nasty woman paid her a visit after the final hearing, prompting her to move far enough away that we wouldn't cross paths. My friend said it took a bit of persuasion to make her understand. My wife initially wanted to sue me again for hiding assets, but the visit made her realize it wasn't worth it. I don't know exactly what was said, but the message was received loud and clear. The house was quickly repaired while Pam still lived there. I paid for some upgrades that the contractor assured me would increase the value. She did pay the rent demanded, possibly realizing I meant business. After Steve paid the ultimate price and Pam moved away, the house sold. I made sure to deposit half the profit into her account. That was my only known asset, to be clear. And yes, I got my weapons back, but with a warning from the police that they were watching me. I just smiled and nodded as I reloaded the judge. Despite my unnamed friend's warnings to the bike club, I was ready for anyone trying to take me out. Some people never learn their lessons. I still work at the same accounting office and still have some old friends from the hood as clients. My boss loves the money I bring in, so he doesn't say much about them. I also keep my go bag hidden in case things get too heated. especially after having to liquidate one attacker and wound a couple of others. Nothing like that to keep a few sharp cops watching and piecing together clues. Recently, my boss sent me to Baja, Mexico. A new client needed help turning illegal money into legitimate business funds. The guy is nice, but oddly keeps asking if I like stew. And am I dating again? Occasionally, I have a real date with a real woman, but mostly I have a couple of friends with benefits. The true love of my life now are the 2 new German Shepherd puppies I've adopted. Waking up to 2 little puppies wagging their tails and showering you with kisses is a surefire way to know your life is good. A year had passed since that chaotic night, and life was starting to feel somewhat normal again. I had moved on, or at least I was trying to. The pain from Pam's betrayal and the violence that followed had left deep scars. My ribs had healed, the bruises were gone, but the memories still haunted me. I focused on my work, finding comfort in the routine and predictability of numbers and spreadsheets. Then, out of nowhere, came the call that shook my world again. It was Detective Harper, the same officer who had taken my statement after the confrontation with Steve. "Charlie, we need you to come to the hospital," he said. His voice was serious. "There's a body we need you to identify." My heart sank. I had hoped that chapter of my life was closed. "Who is it?" I asked, though I dreaded the answer. "It's Pam," he replied. "We believe it's her." I drove to the hospital in a fog, my mind racing with questions. What had happened to her? Despite everything, she had once been the woman I loved. At the hospital, I was led to the morgue, the cold air and antiseptic smell making me shiver. Detective Harper pulled back the sheet, revealing Pam's face. Her once lively eyes were closed forever, her expression oddly peaceful. I nodded, unable to speak. It was her. The woman who had betrayed me, who had chosen a dangerous life, was now gone. She got deeper into the gang, Detective Harper explained. Started dating another member after Steve's death. There was a confrontation between the 2 gang members. It escalated quickly into a shootout. She was caught in the crossfire. I listened quietly as he described the scene. It happened in a rundown part of town where the law was more of a suggestion than a rule. 2 rival gang factions had clashed over territory or pride or some other petty reason. The confrontation began with shouting and threats, the tension thick in the air. Pam was there, caught between the 2 men. The shouting turned into shoving, and soon guns were drawn. The first shots were deafening in the confined space. Chaos erupted as bullets flew, people ducking for cover or running for their lives. Pam tried to escape, but she was hit. She went down in the chaos, her body crumpling to the ground amidst the screams and gunfire. Detective Harper continued, "By the time the police arrived, it was over. The shooters had fled, leaving a scene of carnage behind. Pam was one of the casualties. Her life ended in a senseless act of violence." He paused and then added, "We found signs of addiction on her body, track marks on her arms. It looks like she had been using heavily." The news hit me hard. Pam had fallen even deeper than I had imagined. She had been lost in a world of violence and addiction, a world that eventually consumed her. As I stood there looking at her lifeless body, a mix of emotions washed over me. There was sadness for what could have been, anger at the choices she had made, and a strange sense of closure. This chapter of my life was finally over. I left the hospital and drove aimlessly, trying to process everything. Eventually, I found myself at a park where Pam and I used to go in the early days of our relationship. The memories of happier times flooded back, and for the first time in a long while, I allowed myself to cry. Life moved on after that. I returned to work, got back into my routine, but something had changed. The anger and bitterness that had fueled me for so long were gone, replaced by a sense of calm. I knew that Pam's death wasn't my fault, but it still felt like a failure. I had loved her, tried to save her, and in the end, I had lost her. Months went by, and I slowly began to rebuild my life. I moved to a new city, started fresh. The past was behind me, but it had shaped who I had become. I was stronger now, more cautious, but also more aware of what really mattered. One day, as I was walking through a bustling street market, I felt a sense of hope. Life was unpredictable, full of ups and downs, but it was also full of potential. I had a second chance, and I was determined to make the most of it. I adopted 2 German Shepherd puppies, Max and Bella. They brought a new kind of love and joy into my life. They were a handful, full of energy and mischief, but they gave me a reason to smile every day. As I watched them play in the park one sunny afternoon, I realized that I had found peace. The past would always be a part of me, but it no longer defined me. I had survived the storm and come out stronger on the other side. And for the first time in a long time, I was truly happy. Yet, there was one more chapter to close. On a quiet evening, I visited the warehouse where it all happened. The place had an eerie stillness, the remnants of that fateful night still haunting the corners. The cold beton floor where I had been left alone, hurt and betrayed, felt like a distant memory, yet so vivid. I stood there, taking a deep breath, and let the memories wash over me one last time. Leaving the warehouse, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. It was time to let go, to forgive myself for the past and embrace the future with a renewed spirit. Pam's choices were her own, and I had done everything I could. Now it was my time to live, truly live, and cherish the moments that lay ahead. With Max and Bella by my side, I walked into a new dawn, ready to face whatever came next, with hope and a heart healed by time and acceptance.